So welcome everyone to this very experimental event. I'm very grateful that you're willing to go out on a limb. We're already quite provocative, starting a scientific symposium with a guided meditation and calling it the Buddha the Scientist. We wondered, I remember Diane and I had a back and forth one time a few months ago, like, should we really call it the Buddha the Scientist? Will people feel that they can't come unless they're a Buddhist or something like that? And it reminded me a bit of John's story about asking Tai to write the foreword to Full Catastrophe Living, and Tai used the word Dharma, I think 6 or 7 times, four times, and he was very concerned with people accept this book in the medical field if it has the word Dhamma there. And that's, you know, last night when we, after John's beautiful talk, which really was a Dhamma talk of that, you know, the monastics, we walked out, we just, oh my gosh, wow, that was, we felt so on fire and inspired by the talk. Thank you, John. A phrase that our teacher, the Master Thich Nhat Hanh, who throughout the day you might hear referred to as Tai, because Tai means a teacher or monk, and he often referred to himself in that way, and we also called him with that very humble title. So Tai used to always remind us that the ancestors have already prepared the way. We only have to play the role that is provided for us, and that is very much the spirit in which we continue his teaching and practice, that we see that each one of us has the particular causes and conditions that inspired us to be here today, to come to this event. And we trust in that. We trust that there is wisdom, and that the early proprietors of the Hanover Inn, for example, who laid the first stones, maybe back in I guess the 18th century, for this place of dwelling in the north, near Dartmouth College, that they have wisdom, and the space that we now have today, this very modern space, and those of us joining online who are watching the live stream. It is thanks to those ancestors who laid those first stones, as well thinking about Dartmouth College and the inspiration there. So on the one hand, we can look, okay, this minister who had an idea to Christianize the native peoples, which is part of Dartmouth's DNA, right? Which we have to look at with wide open eyes and acknowledge, and see that we also, there's a lot of love and care that is there too. Care for the future and care for how to take care of ourselves as human beings on this planet. And so looking beyond the form and looking deeply in recognizing something that I think is difficult for us in the West, that there's also kindness and compassion and wisdom in our ancestors. And there are a lot of mistakes which we can acknowledge with open eyes, but there's also wisdom and care. And a lot of that happens beneath the level of form and sign. It's not necessarily in books or in written form, but it happens heart to heart. You know, grandmothers transmitting to their children how to live in the world and live in harmony in the world. And those are not recorded. So when Tai says the ancestors have already prepared the way for us, I call to mind the unspoken transmission that has been received from our ancestors by each one of us, through our family, through our teachers, through our friends, and each one of us has had those acts of kindness that have been offered to us without our request, without our saying anything. There have been those who've listened deeply to us, just purely out of kindness and compassion. And they've been there for us in a difficult moment. And so each one of them is also present here in this room with us. And so now as a monk practicing mindfulness for more than 20 years, I can't look at a room of people and not see all of the ancestors that are there too, that have come together to support what we're doing. So I want to start with that acknowledgement, and particularly to make a land acknowledgement for the Abenaki people of this area who have beautifully and very carefully tended to these forests that many of our European ancestors just saw as wild. They're actually cared for centuries, and who fished in the river, just the Connecticut River, and who have also been very much a part of preparing the way for this conference to happen today. I'd just like to acknowledge our Abenaki land ancestors. When I was sitting and listening to the guided meditation of Brother Namsak, I remember working with one of my German brothers back in 2006 to organize the first, I believe the first science retreat in Plum Village. We called it neuroscience retreat. And to be honest, I was kind of just tagging along my brother. He had trained in psychology before he was a monk, and so had more of a science background. I was an English major here at Dartmouth, 97, so. But I come from a very scientific family. My father worked in agrochemicals. He studied chemistry, and so that kind of came naturally to me. So for me to study literature was like going out on a limb. and it actually came from my own experience of suffering in my parents' divorce and other things I was trying to look for, and I didn't discover this practice yet. So I was looking for answers in literature. And so by the time I was at Dartmouth, I studied literature, but my brother, he had studied psychology also to try to understand his mind. And so he had asked our teacher, I believe, if we could do a science retreat where we actually invited scientists to attend the retreat in Plum Village. I'll share a little bit about Plum Village for those of us who are new. So Plum Village Monastery is the fruit of the insight of our teacher Thai, building community first in Vietnam during right after the French colonial time. He built an experimental community in the central highlands of Vietnam called Fragrant Palm Leaves Hermitage. And it was very, very new, very kind of very unusual experiment with how to live together the teachings of the Buddha with the insights of Western science and philosophy. So he went out of the traditional context of a Buddhist temple. And so what does it mean to practice the Buddha's teachings without all of the kind of trappings of tradition which he was raised in a very kind of conservative, very Buddhist part of Vietnam, in Hue, in central Vietnam, where he grew up and was trained as a novice. And so in that community, this little piece of land that they built up on a hill with pine trees, they built very simple huts, and they started to open some fields to grow tea. And it was composed of monks and nuns and lay friends living together. And that's very innovative. Usually a Buddhist temple, only the monks live there. And then the nuns will have a separate temple over there. And then the lay friends, they just come and make offerings. Maybe they cook for the monastics. They may do like caring for the altars, or if you go to a traditional temple in Vietnam, you'll still see that today. But and occasionally some lay friends who are doing full-time helping in the monastery, they'll live, but mainly to serve and work in the temple. So this is a very new way of practicing. Everyone was included. Everyone's points of view and opinions were included. And Thai also had to learn because he was starting this community, and so naturally in Vietnamese culture, everyone defers to the monk as a leader. And so he also had to learn how to transform that element of the culture, which was not, I mean, it took him, I think, many decades to learn how to do that. Because it's easier to look to one person. That's part of the problem we're facing right now in the US, right? Is, this tendency of just deferring responsibility to somebody else as we go along our daily life. And so he saw that tendency in the temple, and he thought, how can we transform this and include everyone in our decision-making process? So that was the spirit of Fragrant Palm Leaves Hermitage, and they supported themselves by growing tea. And that community lasted only a little bit over a year, really intact. And they brought many traditional elements of Vietnamese culture. For example, cooking rice, they call earth cakes, or these kind of sticky rice and mung bean cakes on the Lunar New Year together, building a fire and celebrating their life together, seeing every time of gathering as a celebration. And if you ever have a chance to go to Plum Village or any of our practice centers, you'll notice that this is very different from another kind of meditation center where everyone's very serious and they don't look at each other, and in fact you're encouraged not to look at each other, and you just focus on your individual meditation practice, which has its benefits. I mean, I've also done that kind of practice, and it can be very beneficial when we need to go within ourselves. But that's not what you'll find in Plum Village. In Plum Village, you'll find almost every moment, even every session of walking meditation, is a chance to celebrate. And whether it had Christian roots, something like Christmas, or Hanukkah for those with Jewish roots, everything became a celebration in Plum Village. Everything was seen as a way to bring the community together and celebrate our togetherness. And so many people now in the south of France, who have Christian backgrounds, they come to Plum Village to celebrate Christmas. So this is strange. It's a Buddhist monastery. Why? Because they feel that somehow the Christmas as it's celebrated in Plum Village has a meaning that they maybe don't find in other places. So that element of celebration comes from that early Fragrant Palm Leaves community. And an integral part of that community was learning about Western scientific inquiry. So from the very early times of Thai's path as a monk, he was very interested to have the kind of education for monastics, principally for himself, but also for his fellow monastics, which included the insights of Western science. He felt it's not enough for the monastics only to have the traditional training. So he as a young monk, in the Buddhist Institute, he had a secret library up in a tree. And the monks I'm sure he spent a lot of time, but also other monks would crawl up there. And if you ever have a chance to go to Hue, you can actually see the tree where he hid a library with books about science and even sometimes novels and literature were up there. And so the monks in the institute, they didn't know that the young monks were climbing up that tree. They desperately wanted to know more. They wanted to know what the young people in the West were learning. And so a number of times throughout his career, when there was an opening in the Buddhist community, they invited Thai to design a new monastic curriculum, which included those things. So that was the kind of spirit of this early community. And that spirit has continued through his later projects, like the School of Youth for Social Service, which he created, partially inspired by the Peace Corps in the United States. He wanted to have, and did build a movement of thousands of young people in 1964 to learn how to go into villages and work together to create better sanitation, to provide modern medicine. He worked with pharmacy students to educate the children of the farmers who didn't have time or the money to be able to go to a school. And so that was also infused with the spirit of the marriage between spiritual practice and scientific inquiry. So modern understanding of public health. At that point, he had spent 2 years in Princeton and Columbia, and so he had been exposed to all kinds of ideas. And really he often said, I had my awakening experience in the West. He had a deep spirit experience of the Buddhist teaching on non-self one day, just taking a library book out and looking at the 2 other people who had signed that book out in the last 50 years and getting an insight into the nature of transmission, that he felt this intimate connection with those people who had taken out this particular book. You know the old library cards that had, right? So that actually led to one of Thay's big awakening experiences, which happened in the West. So what we're doing today is very much part of a path that Thay participated in and contributed to opening, which is this healing of what really we experience in the West. I think is a kind of rift between science and religion. And so we are participating in that. And I don't need to go into the historical reasons why that has happened, and I think many of us are very aware. So I think that Buddhism has a role to play in helping to heal that rift, and that's what we're doing today. That these elements that, for example, you find in the Kalama Sutta of the Buddhist tradition, which records the Buddha speaking to people who are confused about how they should practice spirituality, because they hear many spiritual teachers besides the Buddha, and one says do this and the other says do that, but this and that are not the same. So how do they decide? And he invited them to look within themselves and see what works, and on the basis of what actually works for the transformation of their suffering, then you follow that path. So this is oftentimes, many people quote this in the realm of science when we're speaking about Buddhism and science, but it is really a kind of lion's roar, early teaching on the nature of scientific inquiry, that it is valid for us and to go within ourselves and see our own experience of practice and how how it plays itself out, and then trust in that. It doesn't need to be published in a journal. That can be a complement, and should be, I think, a complement to our meditation practice. But we can also, it's not sufficient just to that, a double, what do you say, double-blind study, peer-reviewed, which has weights or balance for economic situation and all these other factors, saying that this works. That's not enough. That's a North Star pointing us in a direction. We actually have to put it into practice ourselves. We have to do just what we did now together. Be with our breath, be with our body. And so that's what we're experimenting with today, which is infusing a scientific symposium with mindfulness practices. And it's, so to come back to what I started with, that moment my brother, and I don't know how it came about, but Thay agreed to do a neuroscience retreat in Plum Village. And I remember we both very much wanted scientists to come, but we're like, how are we going to get scientists to come to the south of France, to this Buddhist monastery? It's not easy. It's not because the will is not there, but we are all so busy. There's so many things to do. And how can we convince people to make this a priority? Just like we've done today, to take this day together. We've made it a priority. There are many other things pulling every one of us out of this room. And yet somehow we feel it's important enough to come together and be together and do this experiment together. So we went to Thai. So Thai, if you ever go to Plum Village, Thai has a kind of hermitage, which is a little bit apart from the main hamlets. We call hamlets, where the monks and nuns live. And so we had designed I think I helped design a poster for the neuroscience retreat, and we came back to Thai's hermitage. This was in the spring, or very early, maybe late 2005, or early January 2006. And we asked Thai, we came, and Thai was actually walking around the fruit trees at his hermitage. And I remember Thai was in his short robes. Like, we have these long robes that you see the monks wearing, but underneath here we have these kind of short robes, which probably still look very formal to you, but to us, when we see ourselves in short robes, we think, oh, we only do that in our room, or, when we're not in public, we wear short robes. And so Thai was standing in his short robes, and by tending to one of the fruit trees at the hermitage, and I was there with my brother Phap Luu, and we asked Thai. We were quite nervous because all of our retreats in Plum Village, they're led by Thai from beginning to end. And the monastics, we just slot in to invite the bell or occasionally do a guided meditation. And so to dare to ask that the scientists might be invited and that they might speak at the retreat was quite intimidating. We were a little bit shy to ask Thai whether we could do this, but we knew that, well, scientists, they're used to being invited to a symposium and to speak, and so if we could open that door, then that would allow, that would inspire maybe more scientists to come to the retreat. So we were a little bit intimidated because we were young monastics and we weren't used to asking Thai for things, and Thai's our teacher. And so we asked Thai, and what Thai said was very interesting. Thai said, yes, you can invite scientists, but they have to practice together with us. And when they speak, tell them not to prepare papers or to prepare their speech. They just come and practice with us, and then they share based on their own experience of the retreat. So that was Thai's instruction. And that instruction is inspired what we're doing right now. Because we had a few scientists who came on that retreat, but very few. But now this interest in meditation and science has become more mainstream. And so we can call a symposium the Buddha the Scientist, and people still show up. They're not scared away. And so there's been this opening, as John showed us last night in the talk, this incredible openness to mindfulness at a mainstream level. So that's what we're doing here together today, and I'm very grateful for all of the scientists who've been open and willing to come and practice with us. So everyone who's speaking today has attended the retreat we just did, so on Saturday and Sunday, and so that's to introduce a Plum Village practice. Instead of applause, we offer flowers. Maybe my brothers and sisters can show. We do like this, which is, I think it's American Sign Language for applause. And so I just want to offer flowers for all the scientists who've been willing to engage in this experiment of practicing together with us these past 2 days. And I was the one who had to be kind of put that hard requirement. You have to come for the retreat to speak in the symposium. But it's part of the experiment. It's just for fun, right? It's to see, let's practice together, and let's practice in that spirit of the Kalama Sutta, of inquiry within ourselves, and seeing really, how does this work for me? Even I'm researching mindfulness as part of my scientific research, but that's not enough. I need to look and see, how is this affect me as a person? How does it open me up to this insight of non-self? That there's more than just my name or my title or my research or my curriculum vitae, right? That's all just kind of, as Gary Snyder, I think, spoke of his poetry, is just kind of shavings or footsteps, or kind of, we're on the spiritual path and we make these marks as we go through life. And that's the way I look at our actions, right? We leave little bits of signs, but if we focus too much on the signs, then we miss the path and actually walking the path. And that is the main thing. So all of our research and inquiry that we've published, and the pressures that we get from society, if we're able as scientists to look at those as those are just the kind of marks that we make along our path. But we are very clear that we're walking on a spiritual path, and I feel like we are going in a good direction. It means we touch happiness with each step. We don't think of it somewhere over there that we attain. Okay, so I think that's enough to start off. I just want to a little bit. We have on the paper introduction of the monastics, and we will introduce each scientist when they will speak. But I just want to also give a thanks and just take a moment to introduce the monastics, because we'll be a bit more kind of anonymous in the day, just guiding some of the practices that are interspersed throughout the symposium. And so my name is Brother Phap Luu, and I was, as I said, a Dartmouth student, and it's kind of a dream for me to be able to be back at my college campus that I must say I love very dearly. This place, it's a very also spiritual place for me. And so I was a 97 here at Dartmouth, and I felt very kind of, I wanted to take a different path when I graduated, and I had the conditions that I didn't have the economic pressure to get a job right away at that time, and so I kind of, in fits and starts, found my way. And eventually, after a few years traveling and working, I came back to Hanover, and I actually met this community right across the street from here in the Left Bank bookstore, where I was working as a kind of book clerk. So I could live here, and the monks came in one day, because we used to have our first kind of foothold in the U.S. as a practice center was just nearby in South Woodstock and Heartland Four Corners, Maple Forest Monastery and Green Mountain Dhamma Center. And so I was already practicing meditation for a couple months, I think for maybe 8 months or so. But I didn't know about Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. I didn't know much. I'd heard of the Plum Village community from somebody, but I didn't know much about it. And then one morning, the monks just walked into the bookstore. And I felt this energy of community that was so distinctive, and I think it marks people, and that we continue today, which is no one of us is the main teacher, right? But we come together as a community. So you saw during the weekend, all 9 of us sitting up there for the guided meditation and different activities, and then we rotate giving talks and so forth. So I'm assigned to do this one, and then my brother will do another one, and my sister will do another. And that is one of the most beautiful and I think unique transmissions of Thai to the world, which is community. Community as a form of, the way he described it, as the future Buddha will take the form of a community, a sangha. So we, instead of, to transform our tendency to focus on individuals and their accomplishments, but to see that the nature of what I'll call the Dhamma, right? Or the spiritual path has as an integral aspect community. And so that is the spirit in which we share. And so that's what I saw when those monks came into the bookstore. I mean, I know the names of those particular monks, but it was really the energy of the collective that struck me. And I'd gone to different Dhamma centers in the US, and I went to many, and there's wonderful practice going on there. But that thing that I saw in the community of monastics, I couldn't see anywhere else. And I have to just share one other point, which is that the aspect of the Vietnamese monastics practicing together with the Western monastics. That I couldn't observe anywhere else. Because I looked very carefully. I went to centers and I'd see monks from Asia, from Korea, from Japan, whatever, coming through a center, but actually staying there and trying to work out how to live in community together, to make decisions together. That I just thought was so beautiful in the Plum Village tradition. And it continues to inspire me today. It's just a kind of miracle. Because if we're not able to get together and find some consensus, even just 60% is good enough. You know, we don't have to agree about everything, but to have some consensus as a community, then there's hope for the world. Because no one of us in our deep realization of meditation practice will be enough. We need to do it as a community. So in that spirit, I just want to briefly embarrass my monastic siblings and introduce them in addition to what's on here. So like I said, I'm Brother Phap Luu, and I've been a monk for about 21 years. Our eldest sister here is Sister True Vow in the back, Sister Thich Nhat, and she's at Blue Cliff Monastery, which is in upstate New York, which is actually the continuation body of the monastery that we have here in Vermont. And as a novice nun, I believe she lived in Green Mountain Dhamma Center, which is in Heartland, Four Corners, overlooking Escondido. And she is currently the abbess of White Crane Hamlet there at Blue Cliff. And she's the second generation Vietnamese American who grew up in Pennsylvania, and also she's one of the pioneers of Blue Cliff Monastery, and has contributed absolutely astonishingly beautiful songs to our community, putting the teachings of our teacher to music in a way that has made the practice accessible to an entirely new demographic of young people and older folks who find their way into spiritual practice through music. And we're always singing her songs. They're just so lovely. So, and she's a great Dhamma teacher. I think many of us heard her talk yesterday. And then next to her is Sister Thang Ngim, Sister Spirit. And they also, I think, ordained together, right? Or no, one generation, one family after, or a couple families after. Okay, no, she's telling me no. But, okay, so, but both Sister True Vow and Sister Spirit, they've been nuns for over 20 years, maybe 25 years. And Sister True Spirit is a very apt name. She is really, the spirit of Sangha and community is realized in her presence in every moment. When I heard that she was coming this year to Dartmouth, I was so happy. I was like, okay, I can relax. Because she's always taking care of her brothers and sisters and making sure we're all okay. And she's gave a wonderful talk on Wednesday on deep listening and loving speech and how to practice. And it's for a good reason that we ask her to do that, because she practices it so well. So it's just a True Spirit, and Sister True Spirit was born in Vietnam and came to the U.S. and is now one of the senior sisters at Deer Park Monastery in Southern California. And then next is Brother Phap Sa, who is here. Brother Equanimity, Dhamma equanimity is the translation of his name. And Phap ordained just the same year I did, about 10 or 11 months before. So in 2003, there was many ordinations. I think in a way we were somewhat fallout from 9/11, and many people just, that was a kind of pivot point for a lot of us in the world, and in how we could have an impact in the world. And Brother Phap grew up in the Netherlands, so he's Dutch, and studied applied mathematics, so he's actually a scientist, and was considering becoming a professor when he got interested in meditation through a Zen group near his college campus, and then eventually discovered the books of Thai and came to Plum Village and was very moved by what he saw there in the community of practice. And then I think the next time he came to Plum Village, he was planning to stay for a while, and then he decided to stay for an even longer while to become a monk. And so he ordained in the beginning of 2003, and it's been a very solid presence. He really embodies his name of equanimity, which we translate also as inclusiveness. It means you don't discriminate what you like and dislike, but you really practice to embrace everybody. And he's also been the pioneer with our mindfulness retreats in nature, walking in nature. So I've also, together with him, he's done walking retreats in Germany, and we've done backpacking retreats. And he just coming out with a book, I think in May, that we co-wrote together called Hiking Zen, on mindful walking, training your mind in nature through mindful walking in natural spaces. Okay, and then I think next is Brother Namsak. Yeah. Brother Namsak is, ordained as 14 years old, I think, in Plum Village, Thailand. And his whole, we were sharing the other day, his whole family now are monastics. Is that right? Your mother, father, and brother. So it's a part of the Plum Village community is you'll see a lot of monastics who are whole families who decide to practice together as monastics after, the parents have had children, and then the children decide to become monastics, and then the parents follow the children, which is, oh, okay, 5 minutes, thank you. Perfect. I just love talking about my brothers and sisters, so I can go on for a long time. So and he's a wonderful violinist as well. So he's trained in music, and he loves coming to Dartmouth because he loves being on the campus. But we notice he also sneaks out and goes to the music department to go to some of the classes. So he's been, this week I think went to a class on the history of music from Beethoven to the present. And so he's bringing that element of Plum Village practice into our daily lives. The Sister True Nature, Sister Thich Nhat. So Sister Thich Nhat ordained in Prajna Monastery in Vietnam, and just a few years after I ordained. We started Thai started a monastery in Vietnam in the Central Highlands, very close to that original community of fragrant palm leaves, and it was there for I think 3 or 4 years, and then in a way it became so popular that it became kind of scary for some folks in more powerful positions. And I won't get too much into the story, but eventually that monastery was closed, and we moved the monastics to Thailand, where we now have the center where Brother Namsak later ordained. And so Sister True Nature ordained there as part of the group that helped to build that community under very difficult circumstances, challenging circumstances. And she's a very compassionate listener, as well as I would say bringing her name embodies her practice, which is to touch our true nature as human beings in the way that we share the Dhamma and live in the community. So she's contributed to really opening up a space of deeper understanding amongst our brothers and sisters. Like she's always the one who is ready to listen deeply when there's some difficulty or conflict coming up in the community, and to, in my experience, always have a deep, compassionate response that includes everyone, not taking sides, but really to see that every conflict is rooted in our own suffering. And so that's Sister True Nature. And then we have Sister Ancient Temple, Jang Tuasua, who's in the back there. And she is ordained just when the community moved to Thailand. So I think you also in Prajna Monastery originally, and then moved, or you came to Thailand directly? Yeah, and Sister Tuasua, she studied sociology in Vietnam, and then kind of in her work got kind of burnt out, and then came to spiritual practice. And so she's been very active with the young people in Wake Up in Vietnam and everywhere. She lived in many of our centers, as many of us have. And I see she's always the one to bring the community together, especially in singing. So in Deer Park, when we go up on the mountain to eat breakfast some mornings, she is very the one who stands up and says, "Let's sing a song." So always very happy to create moments of celebration together in the community. And then there's Brother Dak Nguyen. Is there Brother Dak Nguyen over there? His name means attaining the vow, or attaining our commitment. So Dak Nguyen is a musician, and now is about to become a Dhamma teacher in our tradition. So it means he will be empowered to teach, although we also say Dhamma teacher is a kind of training. So he's very loved in the community at Deer Park, as well as in Thailand, where he came over to the US, I think 2 years ago. And he's helps with many of the technical aspects in our community, like website and IT. But he's very curious. He has a very scientific mind. So he's very into solar. So we have like solar pizza and solar everything. He cooks with this solar cooker in the Southern California sun, and he really embodies the practice of peace and calm. And so whenever I need a bit more peace, I look to Brother Dak Nguyen, and see he's very, very gentle, very kind, very calm brother. Yeah, and he will go back to back to Thailand in a few months. So we're very happy to have him with us today. And then Brother Minim, Brother Mindfulness. You could just stand up for a moment. Who will be kind of our unofficial bellmaster for the day. So Brother Minim has been hugely supportive of the Buddha the Scientist initiative. So he is from San Clemente in Southern California. So he kind of local to Deer Park, local monk, who came to see Thai when he was 13, I think, in 2004, when Thai came to Deer Park. And his parents are also practitioners. And so he's a like second generation Buddhist, which is a little bit rare in America. But and he worked in I guess political campaigning and so forth before he became a monk. And we had a bit of a fallout as well in 2016. A lot of young men came to become monks after 2016, and so I think he was part of that group that really saw that it's not enough just to, work in the area of politics, but we need to have a deep spiritual basis for our lives in order to transform society. Okay, am I missing anyone? I think I got everyone, right? Okay. So thank you. And I'm at time. Perfect. So I use my Dhamma talk time to introduce my monastics and just give a little bit of context to this Buddha the Scientist meeting. And I just hope that, especially for all of us who are younger scientists, that we touch today, and as we continue to go forward on our path, this integration and synthesis of science and meditation that we will learn about, because it's so you are forging you're really pioneers in a new kind of science, which is not afraid to bring elements of spiritual practice into our research. So thank you for listening.